The Brazilian Shirt Name Podcast with Dotun Adebayo and Tim Vickery.
Oh my goodness, what a difference a day makes. We spoke yesterday, of course, with the Brazilian Shirt Name Podcast, and today we have part two. Brazilian Shirt Name Podcast, Wednesdays and Thursdays from 4 p.m. UK time. On Thursdays, we do what we call a Global Soccer Interactive, which is that we welcome you to join us in the conversation. And you can do that by getting in touch in the chat box to the bottom right-hand corner of this screen. If you're watching us live and direct, then do tell us what you think of what's going on, the conversations we're having, but also about the pod as well. And by the way, do subscribe. Don't forget to subscribe. Give me a thumbs up on that, Tim Vickery. Subscribe, yeah? Great. And Theo Delaney. From
I even did one.
Yeah, thank you very much. We really appreciate it. And do join our WhatsApp.
You can put your
as well.
away now, Theo.
Yeah. Well, no, not quite. No. Both of you have got to stick your thumbs firmly in your mouths for this one because, as I said, what a difference a day makes. When we were speaking yesterday, Tim, you couldn't wait to stick it into me about my prediction about Liverpool may as well give them the title at the beginning of the season because I'm Nostradamus and I know what's going to happen and you've never let me forgive it. However, there was another one of my predictions which I made about the same time. And I think it's to do with a certain manager who's lost his job. Sean Dyche at Nottingham Forest. What do you think of that?
Surprised, actually, because the results... They're very up and down, but they're not disastrous. I suppose the patience of the owner was tried by the fact they couldn't get one in against Wolves, but it hasn't been a disaster, has it? So yeah, I was, because he is a man for the battle, isn't he? For appointing him was the final recognition that last season was an anomaly. And they're in a relegation battle. So, yeah, I was a little bit surprised by that one.
Do you see what I did there, Theo? I lulled him into a false sense of security and hope that we would concentrate on Sean Dyche and Nottingham Forest's woes. But, of course, the last 24 hours has been a tale of two managers, one of which I questioned whether he should be there. And I think I predicted sometime about the same time that I predicted that you may as well hand the title to Liverpool in September, that this guy's a gooner or a goner. And it turns out that I was right about the Dane, the big Dane, Thomas Frank.
The great Dane, yeah, or not so great Dane, yeah. Yeah, sad. It's happened again. And, it's kind of exhausting, emotionally exhausting, because we feel like it's a scratch record, it's a cycle. Tottenham Hotspur, massive club, best stadium in the world, best training ground in the world, huge expectations, great history. And the fact is that we don't pay wages to get the players that get you challenging for honours. It leaves you with a squad that is, instead of being up there with like your Liverpools and your Man Cities, is actually a mid-table squad. And when you have a hell of a lot of injuries, it suddenly becomes a relegation threat in the squad. That's the simple reality of it. Poor old Thomas Frank. The one reservation I had about him all along was, is he too nice a bloke? Is he too rounded a human being for this role to actually be able to come on, withstand the hell of being the manager of Tottenham Hotspur? And I think turned out he had everything but that, that thick-skinned insensitivity that and bloody-mindedness that you need. He just didn't have that. He never looked like he had it, and I don't think he had it in the end. And that's the sad truth. And here we are back to square one yet again.
Yeah, there is a Danish word for this niceness. It's a very Danish thing, Tim. It's called hygge, which means, just like that warm feeling you have, hygge.
Hygge.
Yeah, hygge. Hygge, I think it is. And I suppose you had a nice warm feeling about Thomas Frank.
It's very aggressive.
Yeah,
Very
possibly.
aggressive sounding word, isn't it?
Good.
Wrong man, wrong club, I think.
Wrong man, wrong club. In which
Theo
order are you going with that?
Well, Theo has outlined the problem there of big club working on a at best mid-table wage budget. So you've got big club pressure and mid-table squad, and that's much harder to work that one at Tottenham than it was at Brentford, because at Brentford there's no expectation of style. There isn't. You get the results, fine. At Tottenham there's a certain expectation of style as well, and the low possession coaches will not work at Tottenham. Will not work. There's no tolerance for it. But unfortunately, they won't pay the money to form a squad that is capable of doing something expansive. And Theo and I, we grew up with this. We will remember when Tottenham had the most glamorous players in the league. There aren't too many glamour players in the current lineup. And Andrew, you've seen the Postecoglou interview. He just nailed it totally. You're surrounded at Tottenham everywhere with this. It's the motto, in Latin. To dare is to do. And it's a club that won't dare because they have a business model that won't allow them to spend the wages to have a team that is good enough to carry this philosophy into action on the pitch. So that there's a built-in discontent.
Yeah. Let me just remind everybody watching that you can join in this conversation as well, not least obviously if you're a Tottenham fan, but you don't have to be. We've all seen the drama that there is something rotten in the state of Tottenham, and no doubt there will be a reckoning somewhere along the line. But for the moment, join in the chat box. Feel free to join in. If you want to come on live, fair enough. Otherwise, just ask a question. It'd be great to hear what you're thinking. Theo, I think Tim summed it up, or arguably Ange Postecoglou summed it up. I mean, it's funny, isn't it, how former coaches who know the club inside out, know the players inside out, had a plan, are able to see what the problem is a lot easier than these suits who make a large chunk of the money, but don't have a plan. And like Tim said, don't dare, which is something you have to do. You have to take risks in business. There's always a risk in business. Now, you're investing in something in business and it may all go belly up, as it were. It just beggars belief when I go past this huge Tottenham stadium, which is quite dominant of the landscape where it figures, and there is so much commerce and often enough, and it's a subject we're going to talk about in a moment or two, often enough, immigrant commerce in Tottenham, left, right, and centre, or second generation, however you want to describe it. And they can do the job of making it all add up better than the blokes at the top of Tottenham, it seems.
The trouble, I think, is that the people who are running Tottenham, well, it was certainly the case when Levy was running Tottenham, and it doesn't really appear to have changed. They are instinctively, innately more interested in business success than they are in sporting success. In order to get the sporting success, as we've established, you have to spend more money on the football players in the team. If you do that, you're risking money. You're taking a risk. We've seen Aston Villa in recent years. Their wage, to revenue ratio is something like 96% or something. They have really rolled the dice, and they have stormed ahead of us in the process. They've had problems. Sometimes they've had to do a fire sale and sell players quickly because of the regulations and everything. They've taken risks. In other words, they've dared to do. But Tottenham, I listened to a podcast the other day, which was one of those sports business podcasts. And the guy on it was the head of commercial. I don't know if I mentioned this. Apologies if I've mentioned this before on here, but he was all over all these revenue streams and different ways of data grabs and monetizing the brand worldwide, expanding its reach. He didn't talk at all about the football. All right, fair enough. That's not his job. He wasn't a football guy. He was a commercial guy. But what you realise is that there are loads of people like him who are actually running the show who are absolutely, really turned on by the possibilities of this great football brand and what it can generate in terms of money and profit. And that's the thing that gets their juices flowing. And it's not success on the pitch. The thing is, you're going to have to exploit a brand like Tottenham Hotspur or any other big football brand. You're going to have some success on the pitch. Otherwise, you're cutting off your nose to spite your face by not investing in the football. And I think that's what they're in danger of doing right now, because suddenly Tottenham Hotspur are staring a relegation fight squarely in the face. You know, up to now, people say, oh, Spurs could go down, couldn't they? Or, oh, I think we're going to get in a relegation battle. And everyone says it with their tongue in cheek and with a slight snigger, depending on your, you know, oh, I think we might go down. Now, look at the bloody table and look at the direction of travel for West Ham United, who are in the last relegation place, and others. You know, Leeds. I mean, you know, Tim's already said Forest's results are nothing like as bad as Tottenham's over the last 10 or 12 games. There's only one team travelling downwards, you know, relentlessly, and that is Tottenham Hotspur. And if they go down, then all those businessmen. I mean, this guy who did the interview, he then subsequently came on our Spurs Show podcast, and I said to him, you know, this wages to revenue ratio, Spurs have the smallest of any comparable club, of any Premier League club. They pay the smallest amount. I think it's 44% or something on wages. And he said to me, with completely earnestly and 100% genuinely, he said, you say that as if it's a bad thing. And I'm like, of course it's a bad thing. Look at the football table. We're paying less on wages proportionately than any other club. And look where we are in the league. Of course it's a bad thing. If you want to be a football club, you want to win football matches, it's a terrible thing. Look at the result of it. And now they really are in a relegation battle. It's a total mess as we speak now. They haven't even got a manager. God knows who's going to take that on. They've got 11 or 12 fit first-team players. It's a catastrophe in the making.
Roberto De Zerbi's name has come up. Tim, as
would do me. I would be more than happy with that. At least it's not a low possession. At least it's a feather with a bit of flair to it. But it reminds me a little. We did one with Tony Evans, veteran Liverpool fan, fabulous writer as well.
Yeah.
And he said that a few years ago, someone from the Liverpool hierarchy said to him, "You've got to stop thinking about Liverpool as a football club and start thinking about it as a content creator." And the fan doesn't want to do it. The fan doesn't want to do it. The fan wants to think about it as a football club, and the fan sees the football club and what happens on the field as the essence of everything that is subsequently generated as a consequence. One of the conclusions here is that rentier capitalism has created a business class who don't really understand a great deal about business. They are placed in a competitive environment. Hello, Mr. Ratcliffe.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about Mr. Ratcliffe, the part owner of Manchester United, the chairman of Ineos, which is, as far as I can tell, just an asset stripping company, chemical company, you could say. But nevertheless, he's made his money cutting costs, let's say, at the very, very least. I don't understand business. I don't understand the economy better than anybody else. But I think that's a shortcut way of saying this is how you make your money. You realize your assets, you realize the maximum profits you can get from your assets, and you sweat it. And people know that. You know, London's full of property developers. Everybody's a property developer now, because the simple equation in terms of London property market is, if you can find a ground floor flat or a house with a garden, go and just put an extension at the garden, because the increased usable floor space that you've got adds up to a certain amount of money. If you can build that less than the market rate per square foot in that area, you're making a profit. We all know how to do it. We all know how to do it. I'm just trying to say that. But where does your opinion, however good that may be, come into your business model, Theo? We've heard him over the last 24 hours. And if you hear the tape, it's quite astonishing, because he's been interviewed by Sky and he says, totally unwarranted, it seems, that England is a colony run by immigrants now. The immigrants have taken over the asylum. They turned Britain into a colony in reverse. And what I can't understand about this is that Manchester, I mean, first of all, it was unprompted, and the interviewer gave him a sort of a second chance to come back on himself and say, what, a colony? And he insisted, he thought about it and reiterated. And then, of course, there was a furore following that, in which, amongst others, the Prime Minister, for what that's worth, has said he should apologise. He hasn't apologised, but he has kind of said, I'm sorry for any upset that I may have caused to any person in the way that I express myself, or words to that effect, which is just nonsense. You know, it's a standard court kind of like, you know, just bat away the criticism answer. I'm worried about the consequences of this on football and on people in Manchester or wherever else there are football supporters who think, well, he's a wealthy fella, he must know what he's talking about. But he clearly doesn't, does he?
No, he doesn't. The stupidity is the thing that most takes your breath away. He started coming out with all sorts of facts and figures which were completely wrong, absolutely 100% wrong, to justify his. The other stupid thing about it, what reminded me, is that occurred to me rather, is that he said, you know, you have to do unpopular things. You have to talk about, when I came here at Manchester United, I had to do a lot of unpopular things, and now people are saying that it was the right thing to do. They've just had 4 good games in a row. That's it. They've been a disaster under his tenure when he took over the footballer operation. 4 good games with a caretaker manager replacing the guy he fired, who he said he wouldn't fire for the next 3 years. And he is so arrogant and stupid that he's talking like, you see, I was right all along, you know. I hope, you know, I've got nothing particularly against Manchester United, but I hope they, and I expect they will start to struggle again so he can get back in his box, because of the man. I'm always amazed how stupid these billionaires are. And I think what we're learning is they have a very narrow area of expertise, and that is self-enrichment. Elon Musk, this guy Ratcliffe, they're idiotic. They don't have any wider perception of the real world and what people's lives are like. Yes. And they're so arrogant because they get so rich. They think, well, I must be extremely special because I'm so much richer than any of these other people. So I must know better about everything. They don't even know the bare facts. He couldn't even quote any correct figures about what he was talking about. It's absolutely astonishing, really. I mean, it's beyond not liking him. That's a given. I mean, you actually just think, the guy is idiotic. He's not even that bright, you know.
Yeah, and I wonder, Tim, whether when we look forward at the consequences on football, on Manchester United in particular, because of course this furore will die down. It doesn't have the legs to sustain itself. He's kind of like half battered it away. And there will be people who think, oh, he's got a point or whatever it might be. And who knows, Nigel Farage will be the beneficiary of all of this. I'm not so concerned about the politics. I do wonder, though, because one of the first groups that came out to criticise him was the Manchester United Muslim supporters. And you can imagine what they're thinking now. You know, we invest in this club ourselves, and we, if you like, tie ourselves to this. Because when he's making that statement, it's not dissimilar. You and I have talked about this before, Tim, about the Gerald Ratner, you know, our jewellery is crap kind of comment. Manchester United are a global club. We hear over and 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 over again that they are the world's richest club. Why are they the world's richest club? Is because you can go to every corner of the world and find Manchester United, as if that wasn't a colonisation of sorts in any case, particularly in countries where people know Manchester United more than they'll know their own local clubs. But apart from anything else, what are you saying to all those people who fly all the way? And I've seen this because, remember, I used to live right across the road to the stadium in Media City, Manchester. And I've seen people staying at my building who had flown from Sweden of their 18th birthday present, you know, a whole family of friends and parents and everything like that, to come and see one, and paying over the ticket prices for their tickets. What are you to say to the people who come from the Far East all the way there, and you're saying we're welcoming you to Britain, but you know, we don't want you lot coming over and colonising us. Just come, pay your money, and clear off. You don't want to pick up on that?
Well, it's breathtaking, isn't it? And remember that Ineos or anything like that, he's a billionaire. And the billionaire class will do anything to try and deflect attention from the key issue of the day, which is an economic system which has allowed the billionaire class to get rich without creating wealth. So many of these billionaires, some of them are, but a lot of them are not wealth creators, they're wealth extractors. Hence the thing of sweating the asset. And they will do anything to deflect the discussion, deflect the conversation from the real issue. And the immigrant is the easiest target, isn't it? When in terms of his ownership or his part ownership of United, as you said, it's a disaster. Disaster. It's a global brand. It's got to be inclusive. I always remember Bobby Charlton talking about being in the Far East. And United were playing in the middle of the night, and they scored a goal. And he saw people celebrating. He saw lights, people shouting and celebrating. 4 o'clock in the morning, and it's the moment when, for Bobby Charlton, the thing, everyone is welcome. Obviously, the centre of this thing is the city of Manchester, but everyone is welcome. And Ratcliffe has just said, no, you're not really, because his interests are a billionaire or are much, much bigger than his interests as a part owner of United. But you're absolutely right. The lie of he's been taking the tough decisions at United. He's been taking the bad decisions at Manchester United, the dreadful decisions at Manchester United. And now to have the arrogance to say that he's the one who's grasping the nettle and taking the tough decisions, and the stupidity of him. And we really, really have to stop worshipping the billionaire class. I'm not in any way associating Ratcliffe with the Epstein files, but the thing that comes out for me most clearly, because we all already knew about the sex trafficking and those dreadful weasel activities, but the thing that's really hit me has been the depth of belief in this billionaire class in eugenics. We're the smart ones. Humanity should breed more of us, and it's repugnant. Why we are listening to these people with any credibility, I don't know. Surely the time has come to turn the tables on these people who seem to add very little and take a great deal.
And Theo, what about the players as well? When I look on the pitch, the last I looked anyway,
I know.
there were a lot of, you could say immigrants. Well, I would say immigrants playing for Manchester United, and they're happy to come and appropriate any immigrants from anywhere in the world if they can help push them up the table. I really am concerned for the soul of football, because what football has shown us over the last 20, 30 years maybe even, is that we can overcome all these differences, whether they be racial differences or xenophobic differences or however you want to describe an immigrant, and look at them as just a person, and they're represented. They're represented on the flipping pitch, as Clyde Best once upon a time actually represented me on the pitch. It made my life a lot easier. You'll be surprised the amount of times me as a black person has been in a situation where somebody else in Poland, Oli Subedu, whatever his name was, Oli Subedu, Nigeria, and when I was stopped at the border of Yugoslavia and Greece and put in jail there for no reason whatsoever, but because there was a racist border guard there. It was Yugoslavia in those days. And, the next guy that came, the boss of the border post, came the next morning and said, what have you got this Mavro? Because I could speak some Greek. Oh, what have you got this Mavro in this jail for? And the other was like, it's not us, mate. It's the other bloke that's, clocked off now. And the guy said to me, okay, you know Eusebio? And I'm saying, I know Eusebio. And Pele, okay, you can be Eusebio, I'll be Pele. He goes, and we start playing football. I mean, that's the reality of it. Genuinely, that's a true story.
Well,
Start playing football on
me
the
and
border.
Theo saw this. Me and Theo saw this the other way around in a way, because neither of us have ever been guilty of travelling while maverick. But we saw this with Ozzy Ardiles coming to our club, at a time when, during the middle of his time at Tottenham, he had to leave briefly, but he came back. Our two countries were at war, and the British press was full of the most vile stuff. What about a bunch of animals the Argentines were? And we all knew it wasn't true because we knew Ozzy. You could play correspondence chess against Ozzy if you wanted to. So you're so right. And football does break down so many of these things, making it very sad to see someone in the position of being a co-owner of the biggest club in England, because I think United are, using that platform to spread a message which is factually wrong and intellectually stupid.
Well, there you go. I was saying about the players. Would you go and play for Manchester United after a comment like that? I wonder if it will have any impact, or whether money talks at the end of the day, and people just say, look, if they're prepared to pay me well enough, I'll go.
I think money does talk, and I don't think, as a rule, I don't think footballers are particularly political. And I think they'd probably be entitled to think this guy's just an idiot. He only turned up, quite recently at Manchester United, and hopefully he'll be gone at some point as well. So, I mean, it's important to try and remember that the institution itself. This is what we always say about owners. We said it about Levy for years, and every club's got. But very often we'll have owners they don't like. But owners come and go, and clubs remain. I mean, you look at Newcastle. Those Newcastle fans are having to sit there and hold their noses while people are in charge who execute people by the dozen every week. Who don't agree with them at home. So I think, I think players. I don't think it will make much difference. Whether they should take a principled stand is another matter.
Yeah, and by owners, you mean the state, obviously the state of Saudi Arabia, just making sure we're all clear on that one. Okay, let's round this up by just rewinding and going back to what next or who should replace Thomas Frank at Tottenham. I mentioned Roberto De Zerbi. He's the bookie's favourite at the moment. He's coincidentally, obviously, left Marseille on mutual terms. Our good friend Andy Brassel reassures me. There are other contenders, obviously. Other people have become available. And of course, Tim, as you've always said, Maurizio Pochettino, in fact, before Roberto De Zerbi had left Marseille, I think it was still Pochettino who was in the lead. The belief was that Tottenham would wait until the World Cup was over and then appoint Pochettino. So Thomas Frank was more or less a lame duck in any case. But who should replace him? Who would you like to see, Theo?
Well, I think they should. I think what this club needs to do, obviously, is to completely change its approach and go big on getting players in and getting managers in. I'd like them to be talking to Xabi Alonso, who is, who lost his job at Real Madrid, but is still regarded as the hot young property, I think, in football management. I think they should be talking to people of that caliber. In the same way that I think they should be lining up bids with attached large wage budgets for the biggest available players in the summer, because they need to make a step change if they're going to ever, get out of this doom spiral of mid-table to the relegation. Now, having said all that, those are all things that would probably have to happen. Well, you could get Xabi Alonso now if you sold in the plan and you paid him the money. But you'd really have to sell him in and give him guarantees about the players that you'd be prepared to get in.
I don't think you're going to get Xabi Alonso.
I don't think we will. I'm saying that's what we should be doing. I think if you ask me what I want, that's what I want. What I think will happen is they might get De Zerbi, but De Zerbi ain't going to come in and say, "Oh, I'll do it till the summer and then we'll look at it again." He's going to want a long contract. But managers have careers and they look at their business. It really amused me today that Tuchel suddenly, out of the blue, out of nowhere, has signed an extension to his England contract. And I thought, well, I wonder if that's to do with the fact that suddenly it's quite a lot of big jobs coming. And his agent's probably gone to the FA and said, listen, guys, Tuchel's, my client's contract's up in the summer. What's he supposed to do then? Supposing he has some bad luck and the World Cup goes out in the first round, then he can't get another good contract.
I think his agent went to the FA and said, look, You know that there's a few managerial vacancies about,
exactly.
A few of the clubs have been on to me about getting Tuchel,
Exactly.
even before the World Cup. Do you fancy extending his contract? It was definitely a business deal, but because he was supposed to end his tenure after the World Cup. So he suddenly got 2 years. And what's the point of giving him a 2-year deal when the next World Cup cycle is 4 years? What is the flipping point?
Because now at least he knows if he does have a bad World Cup and they sack him, they'll give him 12 million quid to go away, And whereas before he'd have had to go away with no money. It's really it comes down to that, and that's the same with De Zerbi. If they say to De Zerbi, "Oh, just come to the summer, we'll pay you quite good money, and then we'll talk about what might," he's going to say, "Come off it. You're going to have to give me 3.5 years. I'll do the end of this season. Give me 3 more years, so that if it does go badly, or if you go off me, or you come with or something else." You're going to have to give me. I mean, I saw Henry Winter's podcast, and he was with Christian Thursday. He was the chief exec, I think, at Liverpool and maybe Aston Villa. I can't remember, but he's a posh chief exec type, in football. But he worked out. They were saying, "What do you think he's got?" And they reckon that Thomas Frank probably walked away with 10 or 12 million quid in his back pocket. And this is what they're all thinking about: is what's the end game? What's my exit strategy? Because it's going to end at some point. And that's what Tuchel's about. And that's why it's hard now to get anyone. You get the only people you're likely to get for 6 months are the likes of Redknapp and Sherwood. God forbid. Oh God. Sherwood's thrown his hat in the ring. He said, "I'll do it."
Well, okay, I'll do it and all. But we haven't got time for me. But
I prefer you, Dotun.
No, I've said my choice is Andoni Iraola. I think Andoni Iraola should go and sit in that Tottenham seat.
He'd be good, but
Oliver Glasner's available as well. But hey, we'll wait and see. Mate, I've got to leave it there for now, Theo. Really appreciate it. Let's do some live goals again sometime, anytime you like, and come and join us.
Brilliant.
So live goals there. Theo Delaney, you can catch up with his podcast where you get your usual podcast from as well. Live goals with Theo Delaney. We've got another guest with us today, Adrian Goldberg, good friend of the program and everything else, just written a book. Indeed, I was at the launch of the book just the other day. Adrian, where's all the money gone?
Where's the money gone? The battle for the soul of English football, available now on Byline Books. And thank you for coming and hosting that. It was a great night, Dotun. Thank you. A lovely bar in Old Street in London called The Volley. A very nice place. Hello, Tim, as well. You're right.
It's a little bit of a delay on Tim's line, a long delay.
Several weeks. Par avion.
Yeah. Anyway, Tim, did you want to tell us very quickly, and do you mind, Adrian, if Tim just tells us very quickly a couple of South American news stories as well?
Of course.
Is anyone still there? Or
yes,
have you've all probably by the time that this delay is over, you've all shut down and gone and had a cup of tea, haven't you? Yeah, just a couple of things very, very quickly. One, I think, is a classic tale of the 21st century, which is that Neymar has unfollowed the Brazilian FA because they didn't acknowledge his birthday last week. They got no official birthday acknowledgement from the Brazilian FA. And so, in classic 21st century terms, he took the Internet Declaration of War, which is to unfollow them. Still not back playing, and won't play tonight for Santos because they're playing on a synthetic pitch, and he doesn't like them. So it looks like he's going to come back at the weekend, which means he's got very, very little time to get back in the squad for the friendlies in March against France and Croatia. And so it really is a race against time now if he's going to make it to the World Cup, which is the remaining ambition of his career. Countless hours of physiotherapy and muscular work trying to get over the serious injury that he suffered in October of 2023. A couple of other stories that I think are interesting. James Rodriguez, once of Everton, has just signed for a club in his 12th different country on a sensational world tour. He just signed for Minnesota United in the States. This is important because although in club terms he's done nothing for years, the clubs, he's given them two moments of pleasure. One when they sign him and the other when they manage to get rid of him. But for the Colombia national team, he's still the main dude and the team is all built around him, and it's him and Luis Diaz. So with 17 weeks to go to the World Cup, it's good news for Colombia, that at least he's got a team where he can train and play now and again and do the odd thing, but really he saves it for the Colombian national team. And finally, someone who Wigan supporters might remember, because he had a loan spell there some 15 years or so ago, a Bolivian striker called Marcelo Martins Moreno, who is the top goal scorer in the history of Bolivian football. He had retired from the game. He's now 38, but Bolivia have these playoffs to get to the World Cup in March. They've got to get through Suriname. If they do that, they've got to get through Iraq. Then they're in the World Cup for the first time since USA 94. They are desperate for goals. Really, really desperate for goals. They've scored 1 in the last 6 friendlies. They've even been calling up like naturalized Paraguayans in their mid-30s who were trundling around domestic Bolivian football. And so the call has come up. Will you come back, former Wigan striker Marcelo Martins Moreno? So he has agreed to play for a club in Bolivia, where it started, a club called Oriente Petrolero. He will play for free and try and get him fit for those playoffs in March and then maybe the World Cup as well. So that's an unexpected late addition to the career of former Wigan striker Marcelo Martins Moreno.
Okay, and if you unfollow me, Tim, I'm going to do the decent thing and just unfollow you back. That's my answer to that one. Adrian, you baggies in the Championship are like Tottenham in a relegation scrap.
Yeah, well, it's a season that West Brom started with hopes of the playoffs. I've got to say, I did have one conversation, a phone-in I do through my Liquidator podcast, my West Brom podcast, in which I did say I feared the baggies might be in for a relegation battle because the recruitment did not look all that to me. And in the last couple of weeks, our sporting director, a guy called Andrew Nestor, who had been at the club for 18 months, has quit. And I think in Andrew Nestor's case, he didn't really have football expertise. He was a financial analyst who came into football, very much about the data-driven model of football recruitment. And in all that time, he didn't have a technical advisor, if you like, a head of football. He was effectively running the recruitment department, and it's shown. But it's a really fascinating relegation battle if you're not a West Brom fan. If you're just a neutral observer, I think we can all agree that at -7 points, Sheffield Wednesday are down.
They're gone. Yeah.
I think it's fair to say, sorry, Owls fans, you're gone.
Technically, they're still in it. If results go their way this weekend, technically, but they're on -7 now, so they're a long way away from safety.
They could win another 45 points, which would take them to 38 if they won all 15 of their fixtures, but I don't think that's going to happen. And then above them are Oxford, 28 points. Above them, Blackburn Rovers, 32. And then the teams just outside that relegation zone, Leicester City, 32. Obviously, they were deducted 6 points. Pompey on 33 and West Brom on 34. So it's West Brom, Pompey and Leicester.
Does that mean that the mighty Charlton Athletic are safe?
Doesn't quite. They're 5 points ahead of the Baggies, but we have got to play you very soon at the Hawthorn. So we could manage to get a little bit of ground up on
However, we have got a game in hand. Don't forget that.
Well, there's a very important fixture coming up next week. Charlton against Portsmouth. So that's a real relegation cruncher. And you've also got to bear in mind as well down there, Pompey have got 3 games in hand on most of the teams down there. Now, Portsmouth thrashed West Brom the other week, and we were abject. It was a game. It was only the 4th game in charge for our new head coach, Eric Ramsey. And a lot of Albion fans wanted him sacked after that. It was dreadful. So Pompey have got a bit of that in them. They've won 2 of their last 6, and they've got these games in hand. So, and they've got a kind of togetherness, I think, as a team, as a club, as a city. I think Pompey under John Mousinho, other clubs might have got rid of him, because they're down there, but they're realistic about the squad strength and how much they can pay, and he took them up into the Championship. So it's quite nice, isn't it? Especially after the conversation you've been having about Spurs and all these clubs chopping and changing managers. Pompey is sticking with John Mousinho. John Mousinho is sticking with Pompey, and I think they've got enough games in hand to inch out of it. So then you kind of look at it, you think Oxford, it's great for them to be in the Championship, but the Championship is probably the height of their realistic ambition. They're 4 points from safety, won one of the last 6, probably going to go down. So then you're perming one of 3 from Blackburn, Leicester, or West Brom.
They've all got problems. And Tim, I know you're a long way away from this, but as you look at it, would you rather be the team that's got financial problems, i.e. Leicester City, and you might want to tell us what those are in a moment or two, Adrian, or would you rather be a supporter of the team that has chicken farmers as owners, as is the case of Blackburn Rovers, as their fans have been protesting about for many, many years now, the Venkies? Which would you rather be? I know it's a Hobson's choice, Leicester City or Blackburn Rovers. They're both on 32 points.
And they've both got memories of winning the Premier League, haven't they? So I really hope those fans enjoyed it while it lasted. I really, really hope so. There has to be an alternative model for this. There has to be a better. Adrian, do you think the German model is desirable and feasible in English football?
I think it's very desirable. As a big fan of German football, there's no lack of, and again, in case people don't know what that is, by the way, there may be 1 or 2 viewers or listeners who don't know, but the German model effectively means that by government decree, football clubs have to be at least 51% owned by their fans. So you can be a private investor, you can put money into the club, but the overall sporting club to which you belong has to be 51% owned by the fans. So there is a level of accountability. Over and above that, though, you also have to meet strict financial rules before the season starts. You can't start the season unless you put forward a sensible budget that is approved by the German FA. And I know we've got a football regulator coming in this country. We'll see how that makes an impact. But for now, you can stay within the rules in the Premier League and still lose £105 million over 3 seasons, or you can be in the Championship and lose £41.5 million over 3 seasons under what are called profit and sustainability rules. Well, as my friend Charlie Methven often says on the Where's the Money Gone podcast, that's neither profitable nor sustainable. Leicester, though, have driven a coach and horses through it. And, they've massively overspent. They massively overspent last time they got back into the Premier League. And on the latest episode of that podcast that I do with Charlie, he fears that if they go into League One, they could become bankrupt because the level of overspending, the scale of overspending has just been so vast over recent seasons. A Leicester fan told me, I've not been able to check this out yet, but that they've already effectively banked next season's parachute payments, that they've kind of got money back in advance for that. But obviously when the parachute payment comes in next season, it won't go to the club, it'll go to the person who's lent them the money. So it feels like a mess at Leicester. Leicester were 3-0 up, of course, in midweek against Southampton and lost 4-3. Recently sacked Marty Cifuentes as head coach. And I think they've got the most hangdog look about them. I think any of those 3 that I've mentioned, Albion, Blackburn and Leicester, could go down. But the Baggies, the last 2 games, we haven't scored. There have been 2 0-0 draws, but we have battled, which is something that was lacking. Leicester, if you lose a 3-0 home advantage, the first time, Dotun, by the way, in Southampton's entire history that they've won a game 4-3 after being 3-0 down. So, that's terrible for Leicester. So, yeah, but it's 3 clubs with big problems down there.
So which of those do you think will succeed and which of them will go down? Clearly, you've intimated that Portsmouth are going to survive. They're the strongest of those teams in that relegation zone. But out of Blackburn, Leicester and your own Baggies, if you're honest and unbiased.
Yeah. Well, and we have to caution it, Dotun. I think Oxford will go down, but they could stay up. They've shown battling qualities. They've shown battling qualities. They've drawn 2 and won 1 of their last 6. So, they're kind of haven't got the quality in the squad, but they've clearly got the battling mentality. And Blackburn Rovers have lost 4 of their last 6, but they recently sacked their head coach Valerian Ismail, so they're getting they won not the last game but the previous one. Might get a little bit of new head coach bounce. Leicester 32. Pompey, yeah, you're right. I think they'll be all right. I think Charlton will be all right.
But look at Leicester's running. The last 6 matches, it's been lost, 1 draw in the last 6. I mean, that can't be right. They're getting the wrong way.
And I went with a mate to Albion against Leicester. I went to the home and away games at Leicester this season. But I remember really early on, we played them at home, and I went with a Leicester friend, and I said, "Oh, look at your squad. This is a decent squad." And he went, "No, they've got no heart." And but there's so and so. He said, "No, they've got no heart." And I have to say that has been borne out, and is borne out by the result against Southampton as well. So I'm going to put my neck on the block and say that, along with Sheffield Wednesday, valiant battlers, Oxford United. I would have said differently 2 weeks ago, by the way, before the Baggies' brief revival, which amounts to 2 0-0 draws. We could be in trouble because we can't score goals. But if you put me to the spot, Dotun, and I know you are.
Of course I am.
Leicester City.
Yeah. And by the way, when I said they've only scored 1 draw out of the last 5 or 6 results, are those losses, the last 3 losses, are they based on the points deduction, or was that deducted earlier on?
No. So that's separate to that. So I mean,
oh my goodness,
if Leicester had their 6 points, they would have 38 points. So they would be. They'd be between West Brom and Charlton, so that they wouldn't be doing particularly well. And as I say, they'd sacked Marty Cifuentes a couple of weeks ago, so that they haven't been doing well. But their form over the season suggests that they're probably just about good enough to stay up. But their form over the last 6 matches, that 3-0 to 3-4 surrender, suggests that something badly is up at Leicester City. And the Baggies, there's a bit of togetherness now following that. We got a great draw at Birmingham City the other night. I was at that, and the Albion fans roared them on. We got a bit of luck. Our keeper made a couple of great saves. They had a goal disallowed at 90+5, and we can't score, but there is a bit of battle about us. Pompey, there's that collective attitude, I think, at Portsmouth. Blackburn, they're not great, but they could just about pull it off, especially with a new head coach. Leicester. Yeah, sorry, Leicester. I think that's right.
Well, are Leicester still owned by the King Power family?
Because, yes, they are. Yes, they are. And Vickery.
Sorry, go ahead.
Vickery, the father, was the chap who sadly passed away in the helicopter crash in 2018, and his son, Top, now runs the club. But it seems obvious, really, that Leicester have failed to grapple with the reality of being no longer a Premier League club. He gave a half an hour interview recently to local radio, and he talked about having to address the reality of where they are. But when they came down last time into the Championship, they were still spending as if they were a Premier League club. And I think a lot of people, myself included, feel that the 6-point deduction was lenient. It's a weird situation. They avoided a disciplinary punishment a couple of years ago because they'd fallen out of the Premier League, and they were able to say, "Oh, we're not under the jurisdiction of the Premier League" at that point. They then got back into the Premier League, and the Premier League then said, "Aha, we've got you," because they'd overspent by £20 million. Leicester then changed their accounting period and argued again that they were no longer in the Premier League after they dropped back into the Championship, and that the Premier League didn't have jurisdiction. But on that occasion, by then, the Premier League and the EFL had got their act together, and it meant that that they could effectively be tried is the wrong word, but they could come under the jurisdiction of the EFL, which is why they've now got this 6-point deduction.
Adjudicated, I think is the word you were looking for.
Yeah, but if they hadn't changed their accounting period by 1 month, their £20 million loss over that period would have been £40 million. So it just shows you. And I mean, I've had conversations with, I mean, let me just say, Dotun, this is no reflection on Leicester City fans who, as so often here, the fans are the innocent party. You cheer your team when they do well, you boo them when they perform badly, and you hope better days will come. That's the reality for most of us. But Leicester's ownership, we look at it from a West Brom point of view. We've had to sell star players in order to meet profit and sustainability rules. So in last couple of seasons, we've had to sell our very good goalkeeper, Alex Palmer, to Ipswich Town. Very good fullback, Darnell Furlong, also to Ipswich Town. Our definite star player, Tom Fellows, to Southampton. And Turbin Hegem, a defender who we bought for $500,000 and who we sold for $6 million to Bologna. Now, if you said to West Brom fans, you can have those 4 players back in the team, but you're going to get docked 6 points, we'd take the 6 points. It's like
what you wish for.
What's happened to Leicester, and I say this with no side to Leicester fans, with whom I'm genuinely friends with a number of Leicester fans. This 6 point penalty doesn't feel fair. But anyway, I'm here to assess what's going to happen in the Championship. And, that's my view as a fan and as a commentator, if you like. But I still think it won't be enough to save Leicester.
Yeah, just a final question before we wrap up the pod. I mentioned the Venkies. What's the beef now, so to speak, with regards to the chicken farmers?
What's the beef with the chicken farmers? It's interesting that both Leicester and Blackburn have had fan boycotts this season. And Leicester, in fact, when they played West Brom, their supporters, it was horrible Tuesday night, their supporters said, we're not going to come. And there was a very low turnout in the stadium. Blackburn have had a boycott recently when they played Ipswich Town in a game. And in both cases, the argument is more about mismanagement than money going to anything inappropriate. I mean, the Venkies have sunk over 200 million quid into Blackburn. So it's not as though they haven't backed the club. They just haven't managed it very well. They spent this money and it's, where are you? You're 4th from bottom in the Championship. Same with Leicester, just been very, very poorly run. But the trouble is, and Leicester's the most spectacular example of this, Dotun, and something I reflect on in my book, which is that the rules at the moment allow owners, if they're very wealthy, to overspend like extravagantly, and at the end of it, it's the club and the supporters who take the hit. That can't be right.
Mate, we've got a Leicester fan with us now, Paul, who can join us. Hey, Paul, how are you?
Hello, all right, thank you very much.
Yeah, so you've got the colours on, which is only appropriate. Oh, my word. You heard what Adrian said. You're the most likely to go down in that relegation pack at the bottom of the Championship. Is he right?
All I can say at the moment is I've supported Leicester for 50 years and I went Tuesday night and I nearly threw this on the pitch at the end, to be honest with you. It's the worst we've ever been. I just need the owner now. He's got to be honest with the fans. From a lot of the reports I can gather, we're in deep trouble. If we go down into League One, I believe that we lose a bit of the parachute payment, which then we will struggle. We need to come straight back up because we're going to go down, whatever. That's my opinion anyway. The last time we went down was under Ian Holloway. And the last director there, Mandarich, said that he was going to be the next Harry Redknapp. Well, we got relegated. But them players that year have shown more of a fight than what these players have done. But I think it's misguided. Yes, we do need a decent manager, but I just believe that the manager would be struggling to take this team on at the moment. There's rumours flying around. The ex-England manager, Gareth Southgate, and where we're going to get the money from? Because if this owner's in deep trouble with money, which he keeps things to his chest, he's either got to sell this club up or, we're in liquidation, like Sheffield Wednesday.
Well, sorry, Paul, can I interrupt there? I mean, Sheffield Wednesday went into administration. I don't want to get all jargony on you, but administration means that there's an administrator appointed, and then the administrator tries to find a buyer for the club. and obviously at a cut down price and doing a deal with the people who are owed money. But Leicester, according to Charlie Methven on the last episode of our Where's the Money Gone podcast, said he feared that Leicester could actually genuinely go into liquidation because the amount that the club will owe will dwarf their income in League One. You might get a season in League One. If you come straight back up, you might be all right. But after that, and there's tough new rules coming in League One in terms of how much you can spend on your squad anyway. So Leicester's wage bill will bust anything that League One has to offer unless there's some drastic cost cutting. And where would that leave you?
I'm not brewing to maths, but surely over the last couple of seasons, if you've got your finance at, yes, you can spend 80 million. One was in the Premiership. They went out and spent 200 million. I'm not good at maths, but really? 200 million on an 80 million budget? What the hell is going on at this club? I really don't know. And I love this club. I'll be with it if we go into administration. If we go to League Two, I'll still be with the club. But my heart is not with the owners. Well, with the owner at the moment. And God rest his soul. Vichai, he wouldn't have let this happen. He would not have let this happen, and would have still been happy, family, beers and everything, what he was buying us and stuff like this. He would be turning his grave knowing what his lad's done. He's just too young to take on this, to be honest.
One of the problems,
businesses, but keep the football with the football.
Yeah, one of the problems, Paul, is that King Power, as I understand it, the company in Thailand has had itself financial problems, and it came to a deal with the Thai government. And I think that the funds that used to flow into King Power are not flowing in the way that they used to, because the government's had to help out. It's therefore gets a little bit back. And so the money isn't there for King Power. But also you have to look, don't you, at top and say, how can a club which, in normal times, and I don't mean this disrespectfully, same as my club, you're a kind of mid-table, lower half of the Premier League club at best, except when you have an exceptional season or two. How can you have been spending at these levels and not adjusting to the reality of your situation? That's the bit that I just don't get my head around, Paul.
The bit I understand as well, because my partner's brother lives in Brighton, and we have a good conversation. He's a Brighton fan, and the understanding is with Brighton, your Brentfords, your Bournemouths, they're not doing this big contract thing where, players at Leicester at the moment, Daka's on 70 grand a week. I wouldn't put him in Anthony Nomad's team in Leicester, to be honest with you, at the moment. Can't we do a thing like they do, where they're paying them like a bonus thing, where, if they come on the pitch thinking, well, if I score a couple of goals today, I'll get that bonus. Whereas if you're on contract, well, I'm on 70 grand. Who gives a damn if we score or not today? And this is the big problem. Maybe the route we've got to go is that route that Brighton and all the other teams are doing, and they're cutting the cloth accordingly. But we haven't, unfortunately.
There was a basketball player called Wilt Chamberlain. I know it's a different discipline, but hear me out. Wilt Chamberlain, one of the most famous basketball players ever in America. This was in the 1960s. They called him Wilt the Stilts Chamberlain, but we won't go into that. In any case, he went to, I think it was Boston Celtics. I can't remember which team he played for. I think it was Boston Celtics. Whichever, allow that. Whichever team it was, he went up to the management and said, look, hang on a second. I want a pay rise because, most of the people that come in to see us, they're coming to see me. And the bosses said, instead of giving him a pay rise, they came up with an ingenious plan, which is like, oh, do you reckon? You fancy yourself, do you? Okay, I'll tell you what we'll do. We will issue the tickets out at the normal price, and we will say, if you only came to see Wilt the Stilts Chamberlain, we're going to charge you an extra $5, okay? And all of that $5 goes to you. And that's how, I can't remember the outcome of it, but it's an ingenious way of sort of like saying, look, we're not made of money, but if you are worth what you claim you're worth, let's put it to the fans.
Here's another one for you. I don't know if you know the stats yet, but if Leicester go down with Blackburn, It's the first 2 teams that have won the Premiership and gone down into League One. There's another record for it. So we're breaking records, and they're all wrong.
I bet there are loads more records where those came from. They're not all by Shawadi Wadi, who were from Leicester, obviously, and as is Engelbert Humperdinck, and many others, I'm sure. Listen, guys, it's been amazing. What can I say? But we should do this again, and feel free to join us anytime to talk about Leicester. And Adrian, of course, where can we get your podcast?
Look for Where's the Money Gone, the podcast on Apple and Spotify and elsewhere. And the book, Where's the Money Gone? The Battle for the Soul of English Football, is available via Byline Books or at your local bookshop.
Thanks a lot, and thanks for everybody listening and joining. Do remember to subscribe to the podcast, though, and do join us on our WhatsApp group as well. We're back next Wednesday at 4 p.m.
See you later.
Get in touch with the Brazilian Shirt Name Podcast on Twitter at BrazilShirtPod, or you can email us BrazilianShirtNamePod@gmail.com. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe, rate and tell a friend. The Brazilian Shirt Name Podcast is an 1129 production.